Assalamu alaikum. I hope everyone is well. Barakallahu fikum. Unfortunately, today there won't be the slides on the screen. I'll have to make that up for you next week, inshallah. So you'll have to make do with just listening to my voice, if that's okay with you. Just to confirm, you can hear me okay, inshallah, and then we'll continue the class.
Wa alaikum salam, Shaykh. All clear.
Alhamdulillah, barakallahu feek, please. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد طه الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين ومن اتبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهك الكريم لله تعالى. I start by praising Allah, the Exalted. I ask Him to raise the rank of our Master Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Likewise His kind Earl and His noble and honorable companions. And may Allah protect the Ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam from whatever he feared for it. And may Allah, the Exalted, grant us all the sincerest of intentions. We're going to continue, inshallah, from where we left off in the previous session, where Al-Imam Ibnul Jawziyy, rahimahullah, the author of this text, was talking about his personal upbringing and childhood and biography, to tell his son what he had gone through in the hopes of inspiring him and guiding him to hopefully imitate a similar upbringing, to hopefully be on the right path for himself. And so he talked about how from a young age he was someone that was not interested in playing games with other children. Rather, he was someone that was interested in learning, would rather spend time by himself reading a book, and that from a young age he found a scholar who was able to dedicate his time and look after him and after his religious knowledge. And he became someone who eventually then became detached from worldly inclinations and worldly desires. And that's the last thing we mentioned with regards to the statement of the author, rahimahullah. We're going to continue now with some of his words and what he said thereafter. He said, فَسَرَدْتُ الصَّوْمَ وَتَشَاغَلْتُ بِالتَّقَلُّلِ مِنَ الطَّعَامِ. He goes on to say, I fasted continuously and engaged in eating little. So he's talking about his habit of fasting continuously. And what he meant, that he was someone that used to fast every day of the year, except for the days that were prohibited to fast. So for example, he would not fast the days of Eid and the days of At-Tashriq. Any other days that were permissible for him to fast, he would do so. Now the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to say, Inna min afdal as-siyam siyam akhi Dawud alayhi salam. Kana yasumu yawman wa yuftiru yawma. This means, among the best ways of fasting was the fast of my brother Dawood alayhi salam, that is the Prophet of God. He used to fast one day and not fast the other day. Meaning you'd fast a day, skip a day, and fast the other day. And so this is the case for the Muslims in general. That would be among the best ways for one to fast. As for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best for him was what he used to do, which was that he would fast Mondays and Thursdays and 3 days of every month. That was the sunnah of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he mentioned then he engaged in eating little. That is, he distracted himself from eating a lot, and so he only used to eat a little. And as someone, if you remember, Ibnul Jawziyy rahimahullah, this author who was very diligent in the allocation of his time, how he could make best use of it, try to spend it in what was beneficial. For someone to reduce how much they eat and reduce, let's say, some of the luxury of what one eats, it frees up a lot of time. That if you imagine, if someone is having 3 full meals a day, they want a full and proper breakfast with their hot drink, of course. Then they want a lunch, again, ideally cooked, for example, rather than something, ready-made or something that can be made without cooking. And then you've got, for example, the full meal. Sometimes you want something to start with, you want a dessert thereafter. That imagine the amount of preparation that would go into all of that. Perhaps the sisters can relate to that more than the brothers, but the preparation that comes into just cooking all of those meals, never mind the time that goes into eating them, and then the dishes and the cleaning up and the like that comes after that. How much time actually goes per day into all of that type of food, just eating? Whereas if you remember that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of his wives said about him that there was no smoke in our house for 2 months, meaning a fire wasn't lit to cook any food. Did that mean they weren't eating? They were eating, but they weren't eating those lavish meals. Let's have 2 types of dishes today, and let's throw in a starter today and an extra condiment and the like. That once in a while, fine, a person might like to treat themselves, or they've got guests over and the like. But for that to be one's daily routine, look how much time is going into that, which has no real benefit, truly. And it's not something encouraged anywhere religiously. And so Ibnul Jawziyy rahimahullah is saying that he was someone that used to fast regularly and did not used to eat a lot. And that time that would have otherwise been spent preparing that food, consuming that food, cleaning up after that food, could be used in something more beneficial for one. He said then, وَأَلْزَمْتُ نَفْسِيَ الصَّبْرِ, I committed myself, that is my nafs, to patience. So I was patient with the state that I mentioned, that I forced my nafs to be patient with the lack of food, the fasting, etc. But it's not easy for a person to not eat food. A person naturally is inclined to eating. Whenever they feel hungry, they want to eat. Something natural within a person. So to not do that means that you are forcing yourself to do something that you are not naturally inclined to do. But he forced himself to do that. He committed himself to do that and was patient with it. فَاسْتَمَرَّتْ, he said, my nafs then continued, meaning that it continued on this state. This is because the nafs, remember the nafs that we talked about in the previous sessions, your ego, your inner self, your nafs, which is naturally inclined towards certain things: rest, laziness, food, luxury, sleep, and the like, sins even. This nafs of yours will be on the state that you make it upon, meaning whatever you make it used to, that's what it will be used to. So if you make your nafs do something, whatever it might be, regularly, it gets used to it. So those who say, nah, I can't do that, and I can't eat something like that, or I can't dress something like that, maybe the first time around it might seem difficult, challenging. It's something different because you're not used to it. the more you do that thing, the easier it will become. We've mentioned a few times the analogy of someone that might go to the gym. The first time they lift a weight, they might struggle if they've never done it before. But over time, the more regular they do it, the body gets used to it, and it becomes easier. It becomes something very natural after that. And so, verily, the pious Muslims of this nation made themselves be consistent in performing acts of obedience, and hence their selves became used to that. That these Muslims as well, that for example, get up at night regularly to pray, who fast regularly, who get up before Al-Fajr to do good deeds, who spend their days reciting Quran, dhikr, and other than that, do you not think the first time they tried to do that, they found it difficult and challenging like anybody else? But they remained strict, steadfast, disciplined, until they became used to that. So they trained and tamed their hearts, and those hearts in turn obeyed them. And those individuals became successful as a result. So glad tidings are due for them. So whatever you accustomize and habituate your nafs with, it gets used to. Whatever habit you put it in, it will accept, get used to it. That your nafs is like any other empty container. Whatever you pour in, it accepts and gets used to, gets accustomed to. So if you get it accustomed to worship, it will get used to it. And if you get it accustomed to sins, then it gets used to that. And we seek refuge in Allah from that. So glad tidings are due to whoever accustomizes their nafs with loving Allah, loving His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, loving this honorable religion and this da'wah. Subsequently, such an individual, his determination raised him to the lofty ranks. Thereafter, such a person, his delight, his enjoyment, his pleasure, what gives him happiness and joy, will be in being steadfast to the rules of the religion and serving this da'wah, which is the da'wah of the prophets of Allah. That there are some Muslims who reach such a point in their lives where they actually feel enjoyment, pleasure in performing acts of worship. They feel relief and joy. That's what gives them their inner happiness. Didn't the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to say to Bilal radiyallahu anhu, "Arihna biha ya Bilal." Bilal called the adhan so that we can find relief with the prayer. For the majority of us, when we do certain acts of worship, particularly the obligatory ones, it's sometimes something that we do because we know it's an obligation to do. Yes, hopefully we correct our intention to perform them, at least in a way that there is no insincerity involved. But at times it's one of those things where, let's get it done. I'm in the middle of eating, in the middle of playing, in the middle of walking, in the middle of talking. Let's get this prayer done and I'll move back onto whatever it is that I was doing before. Which, okay, if you perform your obligatory act of worship, all the conditions and integrals are fulfilled, and you did it for the sake of Allah, there is a reward in that. There's no sin involved. Your act of worship is accepted, the obligation is fulfilled. But what did you actually feel when you were doing it? For perhaps many of us, not much in terms of a type of closeness, internally that is, to Allah Ta'ala, of perhaps doing something that we truly feel our Creator accepts from us, that will give us a higher rank, that we actually want to do more of, that we enjoy doing. How many people do we see praying, and as soon as they pray and they say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, they're done, up and gone. It's almost like they couldn't wait for it to be over. Never mind thinking about, I can't wait to do that again. I want to do more of that. I wish it lasted longer. Isn't that how we feel with certain enjoyments and pleasures? Whether it's food, whether it's an activity, I wish I lasted longer. I can't wait to come and eat at the restaurant again, and the like. How many of us reflect upon an act of worship that we did and say, I wish I could do that again. I can't wait for the next time, to be able to do that. Some of us might feel it, when we go to Umrah, we visit the Kaaba, we visit Al-Madinah and the like, and we say, Subhanallah, that feeling, I can't wait to have it again, and I wish I could go back, etc. But the pious Muslims, for all their acts of worship, this is how they feel. And it should be a point that all of us should aspire to reach. But it comes with pushing ourselves and forcing our nafs and being strict with it and pushing it to do what we want it to do ultimately, which ideally should be the obedience of Allah. He said, وَشَمَّرَتْ, literally the nafs rolled up the sleeve. If you want to get ready to do hard work, you want to do some heavy lifting, people sometimes roll up their sleeves to show they mean business and they're ready. So the author is saying then that I got my nafs to roll up its sleeve, that is to exert effort in obeying Allah, seeking knowledge and seeking the merits. وَلَازَمَتْ, and so it became consistent. So he's saying I was consistent upon this path and did not deviate from it by the grace of Allah the Exalted. So it's not something that he did once a week, on a Friday, on Monday nights, in Ramadan, and that's it. Bouts of energy and periods of energy and comes and goes. He says, no, I stuck to this. I was consistent upon this path. وَعَالَجْتُ السَّهْرِ, and thereafter I slept little, because ultimately that is what is needed to attain the high ranks. It was said, whoever seeks the high ranks, man talaba al-ula sahara al-layali, if I recall the line of poetry, that he who seeks those high ranks will spend his nights awake. Not necessarily in their entirety, but a portion of them at least, doing something good. Even now, for example, at least in England, it's at night, we are attending a lesson, there's some goodness in that. So even if a person lost some of their sleep, I know there's at least one person who said to me, sorry, I can't make your class, it's a bit late, I'd like to catch an early sleep. Fine, they've got their routine and their schedule and need to get up at a certain time for work, etc. But for argument's sake, if they said, let me sacrifice a bit of my sleep for the sake of doing something for my hereafter, they would not lose by that. They'd benefit by that. Their rank would be further raised by that, by them sacrificing some of their time in this life for their hereafter. And so